All right. Thanks again for coming back. I am the Fightin Kentuckian. I'm here with,
Wyndehurst Productions.
yeah. And so thanks again for joining us on another episode of On Patrol podcast and YouTube if you're watching on the video. Big thing here today is we have a magnificent guest, somebody from across the pond who's going to talk with us today about commission painting, the do's and don'ts. He's an award-winning, multiple book author of painting and how to kind of get after your army of gray or metal miniatures that you have stored away somewhere, or you can always send them to Andy. I'm sure he'll enjoy getting 100 emails maybe after this podcast about projects. Probably not. But we're excited to be here today on this episode where we're going to talk about commission painting with the great and magnificent and wonderful Andy Singleton. But before we do that, we're gonna go into our, as always, alibis, caveats, and piggybacks, and I'll kick that over to Wyndehurst.
Yep, thanks, Kentuckian. So, as always, this is just talking about last episode or the promises we made last episode that we haven't maybe delivered on just yet. We always like to piggyback as our commanders and senior NCOs like to do. So, from last episode, we talked about Hail Caesar. I don't really have any specific caveats or piggybacks from the episode. We did have some really good discussion. And like we said in the episode, people seem to either love Hail Caesar or they hate it and they prefer something else. And that was kind of the feeling in the comments, which we really appreciate the engagement. We did say we would try and have 2 episodes out last month, and we weren't able to pull that together. We are still trying to make up an episode, so we'll either try and get a second one out at the end of this month. We've got episodes lined up, so we should either have 2 this month or 2 next month, hopefully. But that's really all I had. Kentuckian, how about you for alibis, caveats, piggybacks?
No, I really enjoyed, as you said, with the comments. I think one of the things with the episodes and engaging with us is, we have opinions. We at least try to poll the audience. We'll try to go out and talk to other people throughout the hobby that have played multiple rule sets. Myself, Wyndehurst played Warhammer Ancient Battles, Armadi, DBA, DBM, WRG, like all of these things in Ancients. And so we thought it was a pretty spirited conversation that we had with people on why they chose different rule sets. There was one that I posted on our Facebook group on Patrol about Midgard, and so it was interesting to hear some thoughts of people. There were some people that PM'd me about it, didn't want to share it, but wanted to share it in private. And so I just think the discussion and the engagement is where it's at, because then you find out like, hey, why is somebody saying this about another rule set? What do they like? What do they don't like about it? I continue to kind of get that out there. And Hail Caesar, the episode wasn't really a comparison like sometimes we've done in the past, but I really think maybe, and maybe we should try to revisit that with what's a good ancient rule set. So without further ado, we only said we'd be 2 or 3 minutes, so let's get down to basics and what we came here for, right? As Yorkshire says, and I'd like to hear Andy's maxim on however he gets after painting, like let's quit effing about and paint your minis. So Andy, Singleton, we truly appreciate you being here today and taking the time to talk to us. You have a rich history in the war games hobby with some outstanding work with your brush. It's truly magnificent, and we've talked to Wyndehurst. We'll try to post some pictures and some of the links of kind of the books he's done on our pages, as well as the On Patrol Facebook group. I think it's important to note, and I wrote this into kind of our little script, that I just saw an LRDG army in Canada go for like, I think it was almost $1,000 with the minis and everything. But one of the things, the selling points behind it was this is painted by Andy Singleton. So that means something. So people are, you'll consider yourself privileged if you go somewhere, Oconus or in the United States or across the world, and you see an Andy Singleton army. And I'm no kidding aside, his stuff is amazing and it's lovely. It's a sight to behold. So Andy, going back to it, you're at the forefront of providing some of the most premier and affordable painting guides on the market, not just only for painting the minis, but actual guides for just pennies on the dollar. There's several that I've picked up off Amazon. I think he's got his 9th one. We talked to him earlier that's getting ready to come out. So I think this is just going to be a great discussion, and we really look forward to talking with Andy. So let's continue to pull on that thread and talk about commission painting. I'll turn it over to Wyndehurst, and as you know, with everybody, we're going to ask these questions so you, the listener, the viewer, can kind of get to know Andy before that. But as always, I don't want to forget, Grab your spear, your shield, your rifle, your musket, your belt-fed machine gun, and join us on this episode of On Patrol. I'll kick it to you, Wyndehurst.
Thanks, Kentuckian. Yep. So as he said, the first batch of questions, if this is your first time listening to one of our interviews, is going to be all about Andy, our guest. We just want to get to know the guest and everything, and then the topic, which today will be about commission painting. Specifically, Andy's going to share his insights with us, and we'll have a bunch of questions about that. So, Andy, thanks again for being here. And the first thing we always like to ask our guests is, when did you get started in the hobby? Share that experience with us.
Hey, thank you, chaps. It's good to be here. Thank you for the invite. It's very much appreciated, and it's a pleasure to be here chatting with you tonight. So when did I get into the hobby? I was probably about 5, 6 years old. Certainly into model making. I was very, very young. And like most people growing up in the UK, my first encounter with sort of any sort of modelling was with Airfix kits. In this case, down at the local newsagent. I mean, you used to be able to get them anywhere. I remember you could actually get them in the local like pharmacy as well. I mean, model kits were quite literally in pretty much any high street shop. Well, majority of high street shops would at least have a couple in the toy section. And I just remember being taken in by this picture of there's a Hawker Hurricane. No, it wasn't. There's a Hawker Typhoon in 72nd scale, a little Airfix kit, and something about it just sort of snapped in my little brain. And I had to get this kit and make it. So I did, and it looked a bit crap with hindsight, but that was with the tools you had available and a 5-year-old building it. And I've built it since then as a bit of a nostalgia build, and it was a challenging build that's been replaced now. So yeah, no, that's kind of where I started, and the rest is kind of history after that.
Do you still have it?
I would. Do you? Yeah, that was the question. Do you still have it?
No, not a chance. I do have a boxing of the kit. It's unbuilt, but the original boxing of the release from like the 80s or whenever this particular this release of it came out, and the one I built a few years ago just as a bit of nostalgia project. So yeah, I'll give you pictures of that.
Okay. Do you have
that's as close as you're gonna get.
I would love to see some of those early. Maybe, man, my 5-year-old, like, I'm still going through potty training, so I think building an Airfix kit would be quite difficult. But that's impressive. You're just a savant at an early age. But yeah, I know that you've sold armies and stuff like that. Obviously, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Do you have some of your earlier work, or like even from those years, teenage years, that you still have in your possession that you like look at and you're like, come a long way, or do you use them for anything like that?
I do. Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, I've got on my desk in front of me, I've got a Rattling Sniper I did for my 40k army back in the mid 90s.
That's
I've been
awesome.
probably about 12 or 13 when I painted this. So I've got him set on my desk. I don't know if I've got anything older than that.
That's
I've
awesome.
also got a Rattling that I painted 2 years ago, last year, just as a sort of a comparison, just to see how far I've come along since then.
That would be, I mean, if those models still exist when people start painting and as the decades go on, that would be fun. I think that would be a fun project. I'm sure that was a good kind of nostalgia, like you said, just to even open the dusty box, right? And you're like, oh, I remember this,
Yeah.
when it was brand new. So if anybody's doing that, I might try to do that now. You've intrigued me. That's an interesting attack on that. So the rest is history, like you said. What was the first? You said you're a modeler, and we talked a little bit off air about kind of your modeling background. So I think I'll know the answer to this. But what was the first game or thing that brought you into the hobby? If it was modeling, what was the first kind of game that brought you over from the modeling side in that sense?
So it was actually 40k. It would have been second edition, sort of about halfway through. So early 90s. So I'd have been about sort of 11 or 12.
What was your army?
Yeah. It was Imperial Guard. So it was basically historicals with slightly smaller figures. And it still is, to be fair.
So 40k is still kind of pretty prevalent with you.
Yeah. It drifted away for years, but then pretty much when the current edition came out, a friend of mine and I decided we'd just go and try a tournament, just a small 500-point one midweek type thing they do up at Warhammer World. And we had such a blast. The community was so good, and the atmosphere was just incredible. That we've just been travelling up and doing them ever since, pretty much. And it's gone from
So
being something that I just didn't have a huge interaction with to being kind of my main gaming side of the hobby now.
now, oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. The so I
Yeah.
assume you rolled dice with Henry Cavill at the last tournament, or
If he was, he was in disguise.
I don't think you can disguise
the
him very well.
yeah, yeah. The
No.
I remember the Mission Impossible scene where like he shakes his arm like he's getting ready to punch Tom Cruise, and I'm just like, man, if you were playing a tournament across from this
Yeah.
guy, and you're just like, all right, yeah, I rolled a bunch of ones, like you've got it, you've got it. That would be fun. But the I'll kick it back to Wyndehurst for our next question as we get to know and let the audience viewer know a little bit more about Andy.
Was there a person who was very influential early on? So, like you said, you're like 5. Did anybody help you build the kit, or later on, was there somebody who kind of really mentored you or brought you into the hobby?
Yeah, so I've actually been incredibly fortunate with the people around me in the hobby. My uncle is an incredibly impressive model railway modeler, and his work is stunning. But it's a little bit different to, well, it's completely different to the stuff I'm doing, but just seeing the kind of work people could do was hugely inspiring. And then when I was a little bit older, I joined it was actually an EU-sponsored modelling club that was designed for kids, and it was held at a local library. So we'd have all these like fairly serious award-winning modellers coming over from the continent, and then sort of the other local model clubs, they'd come and help us out with shows, and we'd put on our own show as well, so that you'd have what was essentially a club for kids, a modelling club for kids, sort of 12 to 18-year-olds, maybe even younger, thinking about it. But we'd have these really like high-profile international modellers and model clubs coming to the events that we'd put on, and just seeing that level of work and knowledge, I mean, it was just immensely inspiring. We'd go to shows, and it's long since defunct now, but we'd go to, say, Euro Militaire and the various international competitions as well over on the continent, and that would all be funded for us as well. Yeah, it was like this, almost like this scale modelling boot camp for the kind of people we'd get coming along and teaching us and showing stuff. But within the last sort of 2 years or so, I've gotten back into sort of the scale modelling club side of things, and reconnected with some of the guys that I used to know back then. Now it's been a fantastic experience just getting back in touch with some of these people and just reconnecting with that side of the hobby.
That's awesome. The clubs and stuff like that, and just outlets for this creative process, I think is real important. I think that before I even get to the next
Mm.
question, like a follow up on that is, I think Yorkshire does a pretty good job of it, and us in the hobby, he talks about the Venn diagram of whether you're a war gamer, you're a painter, you're a researcher, you're a historian, kind of what are you? I think with you, it's pretty evident, like from how you got into this, like you're kind of in the hobby side of it in the sense of like you do enjoy. I assume you enjoy the painting, and kind of like maybe that goes back to watching your family, with the model scale trains of like, hey, what can be achieved in these little
Mm.
worlds, kind of on a table. Would you say that's fair, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's like even so, I'm attending tournaments fairly regularly now as well. But most of the armies I take to those are armies that I think are going to be fun, or they're made up of models I like, rather than something I think it's going to be a killer list. So I'll turn up
Yeah.
with whatever I've just fancied painting. So I've got a tournament next weekend, which is actually a doubles event. So apologies to Nick in advance if I let the side down. But yeah, it's essentially made up of stuff that I just enjoy and that I've had in the dash for years, that's finally getting its chance on the painting table now.
Oh, that's good. That's awesome. That's a really good, some of us, we talk a lot with our guests, and especially from England, and I think in the Europe and anywhere in the EU, as well as kind of, my old man and people that we grew up with. Everybody kind of went from Airfix to maybe like discovering the Airfix wargaming rule set to then wargaming. And, that I just don't see a lot of people, having that. really that way anymore with modeling, Tamaya and all that stuff not being, I
Mm.
think, as prevalent in some of the shops as I remember. Airfix and Zvezda and all of those things were just all over the place. And, it's a shame because I think, it goes to your passion about how you kind of got into
Mm.
this. I think your ability to create and just do some awesome stuff with the brush and with the models themselves and the kits is pretty amazing. So I look forward to we'll tease a little bit more on that as we get into, the commission painting part of it. But the next
Mm.
question, again, to get the listener and the viewer to kind of understand you is, this is a hard one, and everybody always hedges. And I just ask you, try not to hedge if you can. It's gonna.
Okay.
I already know the answer is gonna break my heart when you say 40K. But what's your favorite wargaming rule set, and at least kind of what are the honorable mentions up there?
Oh man, favourite gaming rule set. I like anything that's got a bit of narrative and flavour. So, ooh, favourite historical is going to be Battle Group. That's quite an easy one.
Yep.
Although I did really used to love playing Saga. There was just something really fun about that. It was very tactile. The whole experience of setting up your battle boards as well was really good fun. I also like Musket and Tomahawks as well. I've only played the first
Love.
edition. I haven't gotten around to the second edition yet.
Oh, you're gonna
But
you're gonna
I
love
remember
it.
having a
You're gonna love it.
We do a comparison episode on the
ah
first and second edition.
It's good.
excellent. I'll have to give that a listen. Yeah, because I was just looking over some Napoleonics I've got, and talking to a friend of mine who's been trying to convince me to play it for ages. So I think I'm going to bite the bullet and just get a copy of it and get a peninsula or a couple of peninsular war
I
forces done.
I, I haven't played the Shakos and Bandits one, but there was a group back in Lexington that played it, the Moscow Retreat, kind of with the muskets and tomahawks version with I think it's called Shakos and
Mm.
Bayonets, and they absolutely loved it. It was like a riot every time, and like you said with the narrative, the times me and Wyndehurst have played it. Like that's the real part of
Yeah.
that game that I think is just awesome. What is your Saga
Yeah.
army? Tell us a little bit more about you in the sense of like what was the army you picked? Are you a Saracen guy? Are you a Norman crossbow? Are you Saxons? We've never been conquered by the French. I'm kind of what is your Saga army?
I was a late Romans guy. I've always,
Oh, nice.
lived. Yeah, so where I live it was founded as a Roman city and had the second largest Roman bridge in Roman Britain, and there's all huge traces of Roman history around here. And
I,
I'm
I
probably about 45 minutes away from where the Romans landed, where they invaded. I've always had a huge interest in Roman history. So
so
when they
King
added them to
Arthur,
Saga, it's
yeah,
like, yeah, 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 and King Arthur as well. So it's
yeah.
like best of both worlds. That, yeah,
I should have put that together. That would have been, yeah, that makes sense now with the King Arthur and that awesome, awesome. The no, that's great to hear. And so your honorable
mm,
mentions, Saga Battle Group is kind of up there and everything. Um,
mm,
it sounds like 40K is kind of your game right now. What other
yeah.
games? Because you have experience in the hobby, right? We've talked decades now.
Mm.
What other games through the period? I do enjoy when people kind of give us that blast to the past, that nostalgia. Like what games were kind of instrumental wargaming rule sets as you were kind of coming up into the hobby?
Yeah, so like most people, I started off with the GW stuff and did that for years, and then drifted away probably in my mid to late 20s. But then started getting more into the historical side of it. So I went into Flames of War. I think it might have been first edition actually. Yes, it was. It was first edition. So they had really nice army books, and it felt
Yep.
reasonably historical back at the time. And then got quite a nice range of models, and you could get these cool sets like that had come with themed objectives in them. Just the whole package was really like aesthetically pleasing, and it was very tactile. It was very cool, very nice to play with. But then I sort of drifted away from that and didn't really touch any gaming for a few years. And then when I came back to sort of exploring around historical gaming again, it was just as Bolt Action was coming out. And it was about when I was starting becoming a commission painter as well. So I got more and more heavily involved with sort of the Bolt Action and the various games that Warlord did. So as they were bringing stuff out, that was kind of the stuff I was painting and playing and reading.
Oh, that's
And then it
awesome.
just
World War
gradually sort of spread out from there. Yeah.
World War II seems to be a big staple of it. Then that's good. As every
Yeah, massively.
I do have a
red-blooded.
follow up. So as a follow up question, as so I also came into the hobby through 40K to the wargaming side, kind of like you.
Yeah, nice.
But you're still kind of involved. Is there a rule set you would recommend, a historical rule set you would recommend to 40K players as a good introduction into the historical side? Because that's something that we always joke about, that they're the best recruiters for the historical wargaming, because people get fed up with the price of their product and we can poach them over. But is there a good rule set that you feel like right now is a good recommendation for people who play a lot of 40K?
Yeah, definitely. And I'd certainly say sort of Bolt Action or Conflict 47, because they're very much recognisable in the way everything's laid out, and the miniature size as well, and army sizes are very much what you'd expect to be using if you're playing a game 40k. So if you're playing 40k, you could come over and play, you know, the various iterations of Bolt Action without having to do too much mental rejigging. And also the way the lists are structured, so you've got quite a lot of freedom. There's not a particular onus on historical accuracy or creating these sort of historically themed lists. So you can come along and just pick whatever you want, much as you can if you're doing a 40k game or 40k army. And I think once people get into it and once they start getting more involved with the hobby and they get bitten by that sort of side of the history as well, where they want to learn more, then they're perfectly able to, and they can go off and find other games that are that little bit more crunchy. But yeah, I think just coming straight into something like Bolt Action is perfect.
Yeah, it's kind of how we felt.
I'll kick it back to Wyndehurst for the next question, although we might already have the answer.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so do you have a favorite period? It kind of sounds like World War II might be a big one for you.
Yeah, it's definitely World War Two's the one that I do the most of, but I love an ancient army, and I also really like America from about sort of the 1850 to the, well, 1900s. So, you know, Wild West, Civil War, that kind of thing. I've never done a Civil War army, but I'd love to collect a Federal army at some point. I've got some models in the stash, and every now and then I'll paint a couple of them and think, no, I can't face painting another 500 of these.
That's fair.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, that's
But, yeah.
our next question. It's interesting. A lot of people have different insights on this. I don't think we've ever asked this question to a commissioned painter, and so you are going to have a different take on this in the sense of, when I paint something, I don't care. I think if I could get a bunch of money out of it, because for me, I'm not probably as quick as you as a painter, and so I've spent all this time into it, so I can't, like, I just will let it sit there, even if I don't go back to that rule set. Like a lot of my old Flames of War armies, like I've used for Battle Group, and I've played it in 15 millimeter. I won't give them up. But where I've painted, thousands upon thousands of miniatures for people and everything else, this would be a very interesting question. And I'm kind of really looking forward to your response. Like, what is your favorite model or unit in your collection? And then I would also like, in your collection that you have, and then I would also like, what is overall probably the best model or unit you've painted, even if it's for somebody and you've sold it, or you did it on a commission. It wasn't even for your stuff. Like, I guess that's two questions. So, like, what is the one that you currently have that's you'll never give away? You just love it. Maybe it's the one of the Imperial Guard you painted when you were just getting into it and you've kept them the whole time. Maybe it's, an award-winning one that you have. And then kind of what is your favorite model or unit you've had to paint for somebody and send it to them, or, you either got the request for it or you sold it.
So I'm going to do a slightly hedge-sitting answer here. I've got a few different
like
ones.
it. I like it.
Splits into a few different camps, yeah. So, favourite model in my collection would be a Spitfire I built. It's a 1/48 scale one, but it represents an aircraft that crashed about 2 streets over from me during the Battle of Britain. Unfortunately, the pilot was killed as well. And that was based about 10 miles away from me as well. So that's probably my sort of favourite model in my collection, just because of the history that's attached to it.
Yeah.
With regards to models that I'd never sell, it would be my Metal Imperial Guard, because I did sell them several years ago and was lucky enough to reacquire them through trades last year. I wouldn't want to go back and actually have to buy them again. But with regards to stuff I've done for work, I tend to sort of separate myself from with that because the stuff I do for work, I'll just get into basically work mode. I'll sit down, I'll paint them for 8-10 hours a day. Then at the end of the day, they go on the tray, they go back in the corner of the room, and then don't think about it again. So there's a bit of an emotional disconnect there. However, I have just done a large Wild West commission for somebody,
Wow.
mainly comprising Dead Man's Hands figures, which are incredibly cool. I don't know if you've seen them, but the whole figure
Oh yeah,
range
yeah. They're
is...
amazing. Great Escape
Aren't
Games
they?
is top notch.
Oh, mate, yeah. So I've just done 10 different packs of those. It was an absolute pleasure to work with. They were just such cool figures. And now they're sitting on the tray in the shed. I'm like, well, I'd like to be paid, but these are really nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'll have to. That made me think of something. I'll have to try and I'll make a note to ask when we talk about commission painting. But
Okay.
moving
No,
on.
those are great answers. Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Yeah. So also talking about favorites, we also like to know if you ever had a war game that was like your favorite, and what we mean by this as an example. So like one of the last games I played when I was stationed in the UK the first time with the club is we did a 4th of July game where my wife came and we grilled hamburgers and hot dogs and played a War of Independence game for 4th of July with my the British club I was part of, and that will forever probably be like my most favorite game. It was just such a great time. Do you have a game like that that was just like this is your go-to memory game, like it was just the most fun you ever had?
You and Piers in a garage, just the right Cheeto dust on your hands, like
Yeah, well, funny you mention him because probably definitely one of my favourites actually that we've done was we did the Battle of Leros at Salute a few years ago. Probably more than a few years ago now, thinking about it, where myself, Ben, Carl, Piers, we built I think it was 9x12 display. It was huge. I say we built, Ben did all the groundwork. So, but I will, claim some credit. I was there. He just did the hard bit. But yeah, he did all the groundwork for it, and it was spectacularly big, and it looked incredible. So we'd got like a coastline going up into like a Mediterranean hilly area with fields and whatnot, and then we'd got boats and seaplanes and Fallschirmjäger, SBS all over the island, all in 20 mil. So we'd got plenty of space to sort of stretch it all out with a sort of German field hospital down on the boat with casualties getting loaded onto an S boat. And it looked spectacular, but my overriding memory of it is just being horrifically hungover from the night before. But we had such a good time with it. But yeah, no, that was a good one. That was just a really fun day. That
Yeah.
You've been
cool people. Well,
you've been gaming for a while now, and you've gamed with like so many different people. I'm sure that's like a hard question to ask, and especially like the people over the years that you've gamed with. What would be even some honorable mentions, kind of, for that best game, best memory that you have?
as a recent one, actually, the one that I just constantly look back on and laugh at is my friend that I'm going to the doubles tournament next weekend. We were having a game at a 40k tournament last summer, and my dice were diabolically bad, to the point where he just told me to re-roll the dice because I need to get a 6 for something. He said, I'll just re-roll it, so I did. Obviously, it didn't come up. So it's like, I'll roll it again. I'll do that, doesn't come up. So I pick up all of my dice. There's about 20, 30 dice. Roll them, but there's not a single 6. I can't remember anything after that. This wasn't even the end of the game.
Mathematically impossible, but yeah. Mathematically impossible, but you pulled it off.
Yeah, it was 2 hours, 45 minutes of just breaking the laws of physics, that game.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, see, and that's what I like to tell people is like the great thing about this hobby is you can have just as much fun losing terribly as you do winning. Yeah. And there's so few hobbies out there where you can do miserably and still have a blast.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's all about the people you're playing with, isn't it? If
Yeah.
you're playing with the right crowd of people, it doesn't really matter what happens with the dice. You're just going to have a laugh, and
Awesome.
you're going to enjoy it regardless.
Totally true, and that's we've had a bunch of episodes on this, and it's just refreshing to It's unfortunate that we have some people in the hobbies, and we all can. I think it's pot calling the kettle black. Like we all have those moments where we're like, oh, I want I'm Napoleon or I'm Wellington or whatever the fact. And
Yeah.
it's like, dude, take a look down at your sneakers. Like you're at a 6x4 table, like chill. So a great kind of answer. Again, those are some of the times the most horrible memories from a game are the most memorable, and they're funny when you look back on it. We hear it all the time. We hear it all the time about people kind of transitioning into the new game periods and stuff. You talked a lot about this with like your evolution into 40K and then back into historicals and then kind of back and forth with modeling and then back to 40K. What do you think as far as those transitions? I guess I'll try to put a new spin on this question. What is one of the major reasons that you've transitioned into those different periods, and as you were doing the transitions within the hobby? Like, was it the group? Was it the game? Was it something like me and Wyndehurst? And just like, oh, shiny new thing, I got to go do that. What a lot about those periods of like transition do you kind of credit to when you get into different periods or different genres?
Oh, it's 100% shiny new thing. There's no debating that. No, no, I mean, that's it, essentially. That's what it boils down to. I'm definitely a hobby butterfly. I like to switch between projects and shake things up. Especially with my sort of day job stuff being so much historical focus. So I like to be doing personal hobby that's as far away from that as possible. Whether it's doing a stupidly over-engineered 35th scale tank or a squad of Space Marines or something. Just something that's a completely different set of skills to what I'm doing for work. Just so that the hobby kind of feels like a hobby still. So that I've got that demarcation between the two. So that tends to have me pushing out and doing stuff that's a little bit different.
Just because you've mentioned... Yeah, just because you've mentioned this, and I think we'll probably touch on it now, but I've got to know. This is my follow-up, a weird follow-up to this question. But you are a very sought-after commission painter. What's the thing you hope to never paint again? And people are going to send it. I hate painting the Parliament ECW stuff. Like everybody, I've painted more parliamentary infantry than ever existed in 1,000 years and will ever exist. Like, what is one thing that you're just like, when you see the email, hey, brand new Sassanid Persian army, and you're like, oh, or whatever, I'm going to have to paint all the flowers on this. Like, what's the one thing that you maybe don't find enjoyment in painting or that you're against?
Anything I can't get a routine and a rhythm with. A lot of my painting, it's done in batches. So I like to do stuff that you can just work in a big batch with. So I can do a load of uniforms, even if it's a stupidly complex uniform or something that initially looks a little bit irregular, but I can then break down into regular patterns. I mean, all of that is great. It's stuff that's kind of outside of that. So recently I did a couple of First World War biplanes, which were challenging. I mean, the kits themselves are great. This was all the rigging lines as well, so I had to make that out of this easy line rigging stuff. So I initially bought one that they didn't have like a gauge measurement of how thick the cabling or this sort of thread was. So I bought extra fine. It's 1/62 scale. It's a small plane, needs thin rigging, but you physically couldn't see it. It was black, shiny, and you just couldn't see it at all, especially against the model. So I had to buy one that was a bit thicker. It's a little bit out of scale, but it looked fine, and you could actually see it as well, more importantly. So, yeah, I mean, that was the kind of thing that was both difficult and it was the kind of thing you couldn't get into a routine and a rhythm with. So that's the kind of thing that makes me just lose the will to live a little bit when something like that comes through.
It's interesting because
other than that.
Because that
I'm question... send you a commission for 100 planes. Like, I want these already. Yeah.
That's interesting because the question I had thought of was... because you said you just did the Wild West one, which was a lot of fun, and I imagine that's something that would be hard to get into to batch paint. What made that different then?
Yeah.
It's just such nice models to work with.
Partly, yeah. I mean, what I did was I broke it down into small batches. So you've got like a group of 7th Cavalry and some Confederate rebels, who, although there's not a huge amount of colour crossover, there's enough that I can start getting a little bit of a rhythm going with them. And again, I'd break it down just into all the models that'd be wearing, say, dark blue clothes or brown clothes, light brown clothes, or predominantly coloured clothes in those colours, and then just start working it down like that. So it took a little bit of thinking about how I was going to actually get a pattern to it, but once I sort of spent enough time sort of looking at them, I think I just managed to wire my brain in such a way that I can see this sort of thing when I'm looking at a big pile of models now. That I can just sort of see and start breaking down a routine and rhythm to get into with these figures.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'll kick it back to Wyndehurst for the next question.
Yeah, so this is usually kind of our last one, where we're just focusing on you. And you kind of talked about this, so we're asking kind of like what games are you playing nowadays? I know you mentioned 40K and Battle Group, and that you used to play a lot of Saga and Muskets, and you're kind of interested in getting back into Muskets with Shakos and Bayonets. Is there any other games you're playing nowadays or that you'd like to get into in the near future?
There's always something new going to be around the corner that looks exciting. But for now, I think it's Shaco's, Shako and Bayonets.
Yeah, I think
Musket
that's
and Tomahawk's Napoleonic version, anyway.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the next purchase and the next plan, or set of planning, I think. And I'd like to start getting back into Battle Group as well, because I've not done a huge amount of historicals over the last year or two.
With the
So I think I'm
2.0
resurrecting that again.
with 2.0 coming out, I assume you'd be probably involved in the playtesting on the new rule set or the new. Or peers.
I need to start getting some stuff done.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So we'll get into. We wanted the listener and viewer to kind of know a little bit about you, and especially the people from the states here that maybe they've heard your name, and especially the armies I've just seen even change hands here in the states. Painted by Andy Singleton. We wanted them to get to know, like, hey, who is this? Who's the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain here? Who is this Andy Singleton? Like, what is his break into the hobby look like, and where's he coming from? So I think a lot of similar kind of things from what we've seen with people, and especially the going in and out of the hobby, different genres, periods. Obviously, the sci-fi, getting into historicals it's huge. It's a common thread. Again, I unfortunately I'm one of the purists that never had that. My parents wouldn't let me, but you guys, I can appreciate that it's probably a pretty common thread in the historical wargaming world. So getting into you, the commission painter now, you, this juggernaut of the hobby. All right, nobody has. I don't care how modest you seem, Andy. And how humble you are, and everything else like that, and just even give us the time of day to talk to us. But 9 books on painting, and these things are, I don't want Andy to brag on himself because that would be, boisterous and everything. But these things are amazing. Like. I use them all the time. Some of the different techniques, full color pages in there, and I mean they are definitely you're going to get what you pay for. There's been a bunch of times in the past where I've bought painting guides that are like 10 pages or PDFs, and it's just like with Andy's books you get. Highly recommend everybody look them up if you're in the States or wherever else. There's always good deals on Amazon. Check out. Pen and Sword is you, Andy, or is it somebody there in the UK?
No, they're a UK publishing house, and they do a huge amount of stuff. They've got a vast array of. I think they call them Images of War. Is a big photo journal type book series that they do. But yeah, they do thousands of books.
Awesome, and it's awesome stuff. So he's dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of painting awards. I think I got the number right in there somewhere, Andy. But the guy is really well known for it and kind of getting after it. And so we wanted to, on this episode, we talked a little bit about Andy before coming on, but we're going to ask him some more questions kind of about this commission painting and really, open it up. These won't be kind of machine gun type questions in the sense of just hopefully it's to move the discussion along about this. And our goal is to, understand, if you're somebody who's listening or a viewer and you want to get into commission painting, you think you're that good, look at Andy's stuff and then maybe try again. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But if you want to get into commission painting, or if you are seeking a commission painter, and Andy's going to give us, I think, 10% of the next 100 emails. I'm kidding. I'm joking on that. For people that seek him out. No, but the biggest thing here is like that side of the hobby. There've been a lot of people that have asked us about, how do you paint your models? How's the other ways to paint your models? And so we've gotten some kind of questions about this, and we thought Andy, again, being the juggernaut that he is of the painting world, would be great to do it. So another little bit of an introduction to show, this guy knows what he's talking about. I'll say that. I may not, Wyndehurst may not, but Andy definitely knows. So when did you get started? I guess like kind of going into this question, like when did you get started into commission painting? As far as like, I know, I'll say this. I know that most people say like, hey, they painted, they're a great painter and they're in their hobby and they painted it for a friend, and then the friend paid them a little bit of money, and then the next thing they know, they're like, Charlie Brown idea bubble comes up. Like, when did you get into commission painting?
So for me, it was a little bit different. I initially just sold some stuff on eBay, and I kept getting the same people coming back to me, buy more stuff. This is when I was at university. So instead of working in a bar or something, I was just selling some bits on eBay now. Well, I say now and then, weekly, to give myself an income that way. And after about a year or so, I built up a small client base from there, and that was actually proving reasonably successful. It was enough to give me an income at the time, but I sort of just moved away from it in the end. Once I'd sort of finished at university, I then went on and got proper jobs and didn't really thinking about it for a long time after. I said maybe if I needed a bit of pocket money because the car needed some work doing, or I wanted a holiday or something like that, I'll perhaps paint a few bits up and chuck those up on eBay. But other than that, no, I didn't really do any sort of paint for pay for probably about 10, 15 years.
Do you during these early stages, like, do you have total control over that? Or if it's the same person, are they saying like, hey, what about you painted me a panther, but now I want a stug? Or are you just being like, hey, I want to paint this because I like the model, and then I'm going to put it up online, or I think I can do a really good job at this model? How did that work?
It was a bit of both, actually. 'Cause around that time, Flames of War was quite popular. So things like artillery batteries and infantry platoons would sell really, really well. So I'd buy a couple of infantry platoons or infantry company boxes and maybe an artillery battery, paint those up, sell those, and then someone would come along and say, I like these, can you do me X amount of units to complete an army around it? Which was relatively regular. And once I'd done that for them, then they'd come back and say, like with any other commission, they'd say, I'd like to have this done instead. So instead of them going straight to eBay to see if they could chance picking one up, they just come straight to me and order it directly, which
Awesome.
like I say, it worked pretty well. And it was a good way of building up clients as well.
That's awesome.
So
That's interesting.
now has kind of following on to that, how did you get, so you went away from it a while, what led you back into commission painting?
So I had a grown-up career for a while. I was working in different sort of flavours of law enforcement and law enforcement adjacent sectors, and then with the various sort of basic cutbacks that the organisations have had that I was working with, I've been working with a group or a company that worked with children in care leaving teenagers, got made redundant from that. Then did a few other bits, but again, wasn't sort of similar sort of sector, but it wasn't really working out. I'd kind of had enough of it at that point. So I went down to the job centre to sign on and see if I could find some sort of inspiration of what I could find as a career. And they were pushing me to become a social worker, given the experience that I'd got. And again, that didn't appeal to me. So I thought, I'll paint some stuff. My friend Jay actually suggested just paint some bits and get a bit of income that way. So I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea. So I went down there. I signed on unemployed to basically see what I could come up with, see what else was out there. And the job centre was doing this scheme at the time to set people up in business. So they'd pay you the equivalent of employment support, but they would also set you up with a business advisor to help you become registered as self-employed. Now, obviously, being a miniature painter probably wasn't on their list of careers that they normally had turning up. So I think I had to. It took a little bit of explaining, and I pointed out that I'd done this successfully for a couple of years beforehand, and I think they just classed me as an artist, which isn't overly unreasonable, to be fair. So yeah, they set me up with this. They registered me as self-employed, and that was the business form pretty much. I sort of had to do business plans and all the other sort of grown-up stuff you do when you're setting up a business. And then they gave me a little bit of money for 6 months just to help me get on my feet, and then that was it. And I was up and running, and the rest is history, I suppose.
So it is your main
It's
source
the
of income right now?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
All right, so
Yeah.
when we see you driving the Bentley or the Maserati, we know miniature painting's pretty good. Um,
Yeah, it's
no,
probably
that's
time to call
awesome.
the police if you saw me driving a Bentley or Maserati.
The kind of question there too that we've asked this to a lot of businesses and people that like get into the business side of the hobby, and this is something you've grown up with since you were 5 years old. Like, what are some of the unintended kind of lessons learned? And they can be positives and they can be negatives, or kind of, you know, we see this a lot with I'll say with other companies that whether it's mats or miniatures or things like that. There's stuff where it's like, you know I'm trying to think of ways to put this delicately with comments like, "Hey, don't use the restroom where you sleep," right? Don't,
Yeah.
what are lessons learned about this hobby with, this is now your main source of income. This is how Andy eats. Pays his rent, house, whatever, cars. Like, what are some lessons learned that you would say, and maybe advice to give to somebody who's thinking about that?
You very much have to treat it as you would a business. You can't. I think a lot of people go into it where they've done a few jobs for their friends. They've charged them a couple of quid, couple of bucks, whatever, kind of beer money, and then they've thought, that'll do. I could make a living doing this, and then they don't realise quite how much time it's going to take up. You've got to do your 8 hours or 10 hours a day painting. Then you've got to do your admin side. You've got to keep on top of your taxes, your comms, your marketing, the big pile of stuff that's built up in the shed that needs organising and every couple of weeks, otherwise it's going to fall down and collapse everywhere. And yeah, it's just treating it as a professional level and making sure that you're charging a realistic fee as well. So if you know you can paint the figure in an hour, you've got to work out an hourly rate for that for yourself, plus whatever costs might be associated as well. So there's a lot more than just sitting down and thinking, I'll just pop down and do a bit of painting. I mean, you've still got to sit down and do your 8-10 hours of work a day. And it doesn't matter when you do it, but you've got to make sure you've got those hours in. You've got to be very, very disciplined with it. I mean, a lot of people tend to think it's one of those things that you can just kind of come and go and kind of pick up and put down as you feel like. When it's not, it's just like any other business or any other job. You sit down, you do your hours, and you got to stay focused on it, really.
Because you've talked a lot about the hour, and like sitting down and kind of getting
Mm,
after it, and that goes back to I think what me and
mm,
Wyndehurst have said about like the discipline. We do,
mm.
me and Wyndhurst have talked a lot about whether it's a YouTube video, whether it's an audio book, whether it's things like that. 8 or 10 hours over the painting table is a lot, and there's a lot of people that have like commented
Mm.
back on us like, "Hey, I can only do 30 minutes at a time," or anything else like that. I use audiobooks,
Mm.
podcasts, those things. Like, what is playing in the background as Andy is just masterfully, going over some Union infantry or Wild West gunfighters? What's keeping you kind of in that, or is it just it's I would assume Ozzy Osbourne, is just playing in the background as well.
Bit of
What
war
is
pigs or something going on.
yeah, what is kind of helping you power through some of this, and especially where I'm sure the stuff that you enjoy painting is a privilege. You're like, oh yeah, I get to do this again. This is awesome. I'm going to try to mix this up this
Yeah.
time. But what is
Mm.
what is some stuff that's going on in the background?
So I like to stick on fairly long form historical podcasts. Quite like those. I'm a big fan of World War II TV. They do sort of about an hour and a half, 2 hour discussions or interviews with historians who are coming out with some new, fairly up to date, very up to date in a lot of cases research, and then they're kind of presenting what they found. I like that kind of thing. Also, a bit of brain rot's quite good now and then, just to completely disconnect and just listen to some utter nonsense. Just to sort of just as a distraction, especially if you're doing something really tedious work-wise, like I say, painting cross belts on some Napoleonics or whatever, or doing the lacing, something that's utterly soul destroying. Just stick something crap on in the background, something really, really crap.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. But it's good to know. It's good to know that, like, you know, you jump around too in that sense, and but you
Mm,
do understand, like, keeping your mind engaged on other things other than like the
yeah.
Sisyphus task in front of you of rolling the rock up the
Mm,
hill. Uh, is important. Is important. Oh, I'll kick it back to Wyndehurst for the next
mm,
one.
Well, how do you? I'm curious. Do you offer different levels of quality paint? Because I've seen a lot of people, or a number of commissioners, he'll be like, okay, do you want it at a tabletop standard? Do you want it like a higher standard? Like, do you offer different? And because I only paint one standard really. I mean, I might try really hard on like an individual character, but I kind of just have my standard
yeah.
of painting, and that's all I know. Do you
Me
manage
too.
that?
Mine is crap. That's mine. One.
Well, you're just hard on
Far from it.
yourself. Yeah, I'm just curious. Like, and then like
Yeah.
because you treat it like a business, how do you keep to a
Mm,
standard as you're going through these?
Great
yeah,
question.
very much so. I'll basically offer two standards, basic standards, and then there's sort of variations upon that. So I'll offer like a tabletop standard where it's sort of neat, crisp, tidy base coats with maybe one or two highlights. So it looks sharp, it looks nice, but it's the kind of thing where if you're doing, say, a mass battle army, you know, or you just don't want to spend that kind of money of getting a higher level finish, yeah, but you still want a decent looking force. And that's probably the bulk of what I do work-wise.
Hmm.
It's probably my preference as well, because it means I can just sort of just crack through stuff without having to break out too much of a sweat. And then I'll offer higher level finishes as well. So if people want, say, collector's pieces done, or maybe for skirmish games like a Blood Bowl team or gang or small unit, something like, say, muskets and tomahawks or whatever, then people generally seem to go for the high level of finish. And then occasionally I'll get people who want like a display standard piece. But yeah, it just kind of depends what they want. And when they approach me for a commission, I'll send them pictures of the various levels of work, and then from that they can decide what they want to pay, if they want to split it between various levels of finish for various models. Yeah, it's essentially whatever the client's after. I can then give them a brief of the services I can provide, and then the two of us just go through and see what's going to work for what they need.
I got to follow up to that as well. That was a great question, Wyndhurst. Um, Anytime you're in a service industry, and I've worked in services before, dealing with the public can be very rough, as you know. I'm very sure
Yeah.
that you know this, and so wargamers are not immune to that, right? We have people can be
Mm,
difficult, and so hey, I want you to paint this kind of display standard for like $100, you know, or whatever that it is, and I
mm,
want you to paint this 500-man army for that. Um, do you
yeah.
like with your time, because time when you're self-employed, time is money, you know, the idea that you're communicating
Mm,
with these people and you're going back and forth for it to fizzle out. um, how
mm,
do you manage something like that with hey, you know, I used to work in a parts store, and we would say like TW for this customer or whatever that was just going to try to just
mm,
bog you down, get you to the lowest price they could, and you've spent hours on them,
yeah.
and so TW meant time waster. Like, hey, this person's just wasting your
Yeah.
time. You know, like move on. How do you manage that with? I'm sure the congenial and very nice and appropriate and always on their best behavior wargamers and that you deal with. Like, how do you deal with that?
You know what? I've actually been very lucky. It doesn't come up very often at all. Uh, I'm generally quite upfront when someone approaches me about a commission that I'd like. I'm generally quite upfront by saying these are what the rates are. And then if they're interested, they'll stick around. If they're not, then they tend to say, no, thank you. Normally what the procedure would be is someone say, look, hey, you're a commission painter? So, yes. Can you paint me this? And I'm like, yeah, these are the basic rates. They start from this much, go up to this much, or I can do whatever you need, basically. And then sometimes they'll say, that's more than I expected or more than I was willing to pay. And other times they'll say, yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's good. And obviously there's always, wheeling and dealing that you can do and stuff like that. But that was just interesting because
Yeah.
I'm assuming people are, always trying to get the most for their money. And sometimes when
Yeah.
you're open to that, dozens of times a day, that can be
Mm.
frustrating as for somebody who's worked in services
Yeah.
before. So it's good that
Yeah.
you've unfortunately, maybe just the wargaming community, as Wyndehurst has always said, and we've kind of harkened back to, is probably self-regulating to some degree, and where it's the
Mm.
discretionary income. It's not like getting your car fixed. If you don't get your army
Yeah.
painted, okay, well then you can't paint. You can't play at the local club or something. So either put up or shut up.
Yeah.
That's probably a good.
Mm.
Um, no, interesting part. I'll question for Wyndehurst, or
Yeah,
want to ask that one.
that kind of leads actually into this question. So it's like, can you pick and choose the projects from customers? How do you decide? So with that, has it ever come up where someone's willing to pay, but it's like, I just don't want to do this project? Or is it based on time management where it's like, well, I'm just backed up. I can't take on a project that large right now. Do you have to really pick and choose? Or have there been times when you felt like you needed to turn somebody away?
Yeah. So that's a good question. When I started off, I'd basically accept any and every piece of work that came through. And that was quite fortunate as well, in a way. And aside from obviously the income that it generated, but it also gave me an understanding of time and project management as well, because it taught me what was worth my while accepting as a commission and what would be a waste of time. So personally, I don't tend to accept 40k projects or Warhammer projects in general. I've
Wow.
got a couple of guys I do some of the old world, like very old fashioned, like the metal ranges for. Uh, but yeah, for the most part, I tend not to do their stuff just because it's ring fenced for my hobby, so I like to keep that separate. But also, I find they're quite labour intensive projects to work on as well. There's quite a lot of detail to paint, so I'll generally decline if someone asks me to do a workshop project. It's not to say it's 100% ban, because it isn't, and I certainly do some 40k and GW stuff for people, but it's not what I want to make as the main focus of the business. And other times it'll be people will want just a very complex project that's probably unrealistic, and I'll generally have a chat with them, and then we'll come up with something a bit more manageable. Uh, with regards to timescales, people are coming to you because they like your work, so they're generally happier to wait. I think. I mean, I prefer to get to stuff as quickly as possible, but sometimes it can take a while.
What's your
Unfortunately.
average like throughput? So if someone were to email you on, today or Monday, what's the turnaround time? And let's put something at a generic, because again, I understand it's going to be highly fact dependent on what gets sent to you. So let's say a platoon,
Mm.
30 guys, 28 millimeter. I send you the email Sunday. How long until probably brush hits model?
Ooh, that's a good question. I've usually got about 2 to 3 month lead of work sort of in front of me. So, say a bigger job will have a longer lead, and then a smaller job like a sort of a 10 to 15 figure batch, I can generally fit in amongst the bigger stuff. So something like sort of the infantry 28 mm infantry platoon, you're probably looking about 3 months, 3 to 4 months
It's not
That's
bad.
sort of
awesome.
from
That's
email to getting your figures back. Yeah.
That's pretty good.
that's well, it's super fast even for like I don't think I can ancient armies I can paint fast because like you said it's your
Mm.
but platoons I try to take my time on and like even if that were in my
Yeah.
mind, I'm trying to keep in my head, and I love that we're branching out to a lot of different questions, but like I'll have two or three
Mm.
projects going on. That would be another good kind of like follow up. How many projects? First of all, like how many painting benches do you have? Right? Is there, there's 10 in a row, and there's French and
Yeah.
Indian War, one there's World War II, one there's Wild West figures. How do you keep that, and how do you bounce back and forth with kind of getting that timeline?
So it's a level of discipline. Sort of, it just keeps coming back to that really. So I've got an A3. I don't know what it was. It was some sort of poster board or something. I think it started life as. It's just encrusted in primer now, layers and layers of primer. But that's effectively my work tray. So if a project will fit on that, then that's what gets worked on as a batch. But I tend to do a client at a time as well, so I won't have a couple of different jobs running sort of concurrently. So I'll be doing, say, whatever I've been sent from whatever I've allocated myself for that week. I mean, the main issue I have with kind of project management is sort of fitting them in sequence. So I'll normally do a big job, then a smaller job, then another big job, just to keep things ticking along fairly quickly, or kind of as quickly as they can. But sometimes there'll just be some snarl up or whatever somewhere along the way for, could be any sort of number of reasons. But yeah, that's the professional side of it. So I've got a professional tray of stuff that gets worked on. And then I've got a personal one as well, which lives on the shelf behind me. It's kind of turned into a bit of a shelf of doom at the moment because I just haven't had time to finish anything. So I've got a couple of different 35th scale tanks on there that are painted but need sort of finishing. And then a couple of 48 scale Mustangs as well that need the last transfers doing and a bit of weathering. So there are a couple of projects, or my own projects, that just sat there for a few months that have just been accumulating dust because I just haven't had time to get round to them. But yeah, I like to keep things relatively split up between my stuff and other people's, and then just have one client's job on at a time, really.
So I have a follow up. Something you mentioned, an observation, and I've heard this actually from other people, and I've observed it myself. So, like with 40Ks plastics, a lot of detail. And the comment I heard is that with the digital age of models being digitally sculpted for a lot of plastics, and now 3D printable stuff, they can 3D sculpt stuff that you couldn't sculpt with hand before in our older metals and older plastics. And so that you're getting detail, so much detail or fine detail that it's hard to paint. And I've noticed that creeping in some of the historical sides and 3D printing sides, and you get your hands on so many models. Do you notice that's a trend that's happening? That these newer models, newer generation plastics are really becoming almost more challenging to paint because of the level of detail.
Oh, very much so. Like you look back over older quality figures, figures from the 80s and 90s, and the detail, it's still there, it's still good, but it's bigger because it's where it's been sculpted by hand. It's it's just physically got to be bigger. But then you're getting figures that are now much more true to scale as well. So I noticed this especially with 3D prints. Well, obviously it depends on the range, but the finesse of them, they're designed to look very realistic as renders, so everything's in scale and you're not getting such oversized details and proportions. So your hands, your buttons, your accoutrements, all the equipment, badges, all that sort of stuff, it's scaled down, well, it's put into the render so it's at the correct size. But then with a lot of models, when they're printed, all of that detail is then shrunk down into a much smaller area. So it becomes a lot more difficult to paint. And I've noticed with quite a lot of especially the printed sculpts I've worked on, that the level of detail in the sculpts, though they look amazing, from a painting perspective, they're actually quite difficult because they are so fine. They're almost too fine to be painted, or at least painted enjoyably.
Yeah, and that was the comment that I think was so well captured. It is that the older ones, if it was sculpted by hand, it could be painted by hand. But we're getting away from that, and I think the
Yeah.
people designing a lot of these models aren't the same people painting them, and they kind of lose touch with
No.
what's practical and reasonable. You just mentioned that, and I was just curious, somebody who has their hands on such a vast range as you probably do, if you also had a similar observation.
Ooh, that's a great question,
Yeah.
Wyndehurst. And then my next question follow up. You can do honorable mentions, but we're talking to somebody that probably has the best amount of like domain knowledge on it. What is, at least up there in the top tier, the best miniature company for like detail and stuff like that? And again, I'm not asking you to like box yourself in and say this is the one, but like what is, after all the plastics with Vitrix, War Games Foundry, metal, like what is one of the probably, and maybe just for painting, right? It might not have the best detail, but what's one of the best miniature lines that you enjoy kind of painting? And I won't ask you the opposite of that, is like what's the worst, so we can crap on a company. I won't ask you that, but like what is probably one of the leading ones, and maybe some honorable mentions.
So, yeah, that's a good, very good question, because there's so many different ranges and so many ranges within each manufacturer's product
I,
lines
I,
can be so variable.
I
But
want
I
you.
think,
I want you to say
yeah,
Bacchus. I want you to say it's Bacchus, 6 millimeter. Oh, it's easy.
I've got I think it's a 6mm PSC printed Waffen SS Grenadier on my desk here, and the detail on it is just ludicrous. I mean, it's great, but it's ludicrous. Uh, yeah, I think for me, favourite ranges. AB Miniatures do some absolutely stunning, like spectacularly good 20mm World War Two, to the point where there's not a lot of better World War Two figures in any scale. That said, I love the Perrys. They do everything pretty much. They do so many different ranges, and they've got so much character, and you can't go wrong with their stuff. Really, it's spectacular. But I like anything sculpted by Paul Hicks. So you've got obviously Empress miniatures, and then the stuff he's done at Brigade Games as well over in the States.
Well, and the
Who's
new I have an Arnhem Army and
mm.
Frost, and like the new stuff that they're coming out with just looks. I'm like, man, I gotta
Oh
go
yeah,
buy some more models. Those look. Paul Hicks is amazing work. No,
yeah,
that's
you know.
interesting. As far as the 3D prints, is there one? I see a lot of them that are just coming alive, like what you talked about with the detail, like the piano war game stuff.
Mm.
I don't want to do Napoleonics in 28 because I'd like to not play on a 20-foot table. But
Yeah.
what, like the piano war games and like some of these STLs, like me and Wyndehurst just did a Punic War STO, Echoes of War, Carlo out of Spain.
Mm.
Like, what is there one that you think is good, at least in leading the STLs, that maybe has a decent amount of detail, or that you
Yeah,
painted?
I think it's Mardev Miniatures do a range of, well, I say the 28. I think they're originally scaled to 28mm, but then they can be sort of reduced down, kind of to whatever you want. But they do some very, very nice World War Two stuff. And there's a range of vehicles. PSC are printing them. They've got the license for it, and I can't remember the name of the designer. I think it's Dark Light Miniatures, but I could be completely wrong there. But they're spectacular. I got their 20mm Panzer IV, and the detail on it was like absolutely spectacular. Even to the point it had the Scherzen rails as part of the casting. So the model consisted of a turret and a hull, and it got all the Scherzen plates on the turret, and then the one I'd got, it didn't have any Scherzen plates on the side of the hull, it just had the rails. And again, turret and hull, two pieces, and the detail was better than, you know,
The
the
ones
Revell
you got to
if you
glue
bought one of
together,
those.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Oh, that's
Oh,
it.
it's spectacular stuff.
As many models have passed through your hands and like your eyes have laid on, like I just think that's kind of like a fringe benefit of,
Yeah.
I think what you're doing is like you've seen so much, so you've seen where companies like
Yeah,
miss the boat, or when you're like, why did you design this way, like I can't fit the hand in here, or why am I painting this?
yeah.
But no, interesting. Like, I'll kick it back to Wyndehurst to other thoughts, or move on to another question.
Yeah. So, and I know Kentucky and I are both really curious about this. But the most weirdest or outlandish commission you've done or been asked to do, like if you had one that was just so like I'm not painting that. That's just out there. Is there anything that sticks out? Has that ever happened?
All the emus
not
from
had a
the Emu
huge,
War.
yeah, on a 1-to-1 ratio. I've not had a huge amount of weird stuff. I think no, I've been quite fortunate. But what I have done that's a little bit different. But I've done things for uh, family members of personnel who served in the Second World War. Obviously that's what I'm predominantly known for. So I did a couple of armoured cars for a gentleman's, I think it was his 100th birthday, who had served with the Dragoon Guards in sort of Northern Europe into Denmark.
Oh
So
wow.
he'd crewed Daimlers and Daimler Dingoes. So I did him one of each of those. And then, anything like that I won't accept a payment for. So that went as a charitable donation to,
Wow.
I think it was Combat Stress or something like that. And then
Wow.
recently, I've just done another job for a gentleman who was a Liberator pilot with the Czech Air Force. And he sunk a container ship carrying tungsten ore from sort of South America to Germany and caused a significant impact into the German warfare effort by sinking this ship. So I built him a model of the aircraft that his dad flew. And
That's
then
awesome.
I know him through a museum I volunteer at as well. And I've just been asked if I can donate some models to their collection as well. As I've got a huge interest in the Battle of Britain, and I volunteer at the Kent Battle of Britain Museum at Hawkinge. So my most recent book was on the Battle of Britain, and they gave me a huge amount of help with that and access to photos and archives and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. And I was doing a signing event there last weekend, and they asked me if they could have a couple of models. So those are going to be going off to live down there at the end of the year, which is quite
That's
exciting.
That's cool.
the people that get that know so much about a period, like they know like the details. You're going to know every
Mm,
wingman or every person, especially with your work at that museum.
mm,
Sometimes I find that the people that are more into it, they really can't settle on a rule set, or they don't like one because they
yeah.
just know so many of the variations. They know all the things that are affecting the battle. They can't like remove it to be like, hey, we've got
Mm,
to distill this down to a game. What is, and
mm.
especially like with your passion, like you said with the Spitfire and everything else, like what's your favorite aerial combat game? I'm just curious, or for World War II. What's your favorite? What do you, they nothing I think would get it right with just how much detail and how much knowledge you have on the period. But what is close or good enough for you?
I've never been hugely into aerial combat games, interestingly enough. Just as a
Oh,
concept of a game, they've never overly appealed to me. I liked Aeronautica Imperialis, that was good fun. And then I used to like Wings of War, the old First
yeah,
World
yeah,
War
yeah.
one with the pre-made models. Uh, but they were just really fun games. Were very
That's
enjoyable,
interesting.
and they just happened to feature aeroplanes.
As many Spitfires and Hurricanes and Messerschmitts, I'm sure you've painted.
Yeah,
That's interesting. But the no, no,
yeah, I've
great
never
question.
played the game with a single one.
Yeah. What is what's your the question kind of too with this, with like what's the weirdest one or the thing that you did, which that was awesome answer, and especially to give back to the community. That's awesome. But what is the largest commission? So the 1-to-1 ratio La Grande Army that you painted, or what's been the largest commission you've ever painted in the painting career here?
Uh, Single physically biggest model would be
No,
Smaug
no,
from the
yeah,
Lord of the Rings range. That
the
that
dragon.
thing, yeah. Until you actually looking at it, think I've got to paint this bloody thing. You don't appreciate just how monumentally big it is. I think it's about 5 kilos, so it's about 10, 12 pounds.
Wow.
That's
And
that's rattle can. That's rattle can for me all
Yeah.
day. I could knock that thing out this afternoon. What's the
yeah, and then,
like? What's the amount of miniatures? What's the largest for amount? I'd be very curious.
I'll do batches. I've done a few jobs where I've done multiple batches of 100 figures. So I've done a couple of thousand Revolutionary War figures. Both sides of that as a long-term project, and probably not far off of that in ancients as well, sort of Romans and ancient Britons. I couldn't tell you which one was the bigger job of the two off the top of my head
But
because they were
several
both enormous. But yeah,
several
yeah,
thousand. Yeah,
lots of figures.
That's awesome.
But yeah,
That's awesome.
the biggest batch I'll work on is about 100 figures. So that's kind of the capacity of my sort of project tray as well.
I have that's about where I'm at right now. I do batch painting,
Mm.
nowhere near to the ability that you do, and I use shield decals and stuff like that. And Romans, I think, are really easy to
Yeah.
batch paint. But when I've tried to batch paint like gulls and stuff like
Mm.
that, and do all the tartan and everything else, I
Yeah.
normally I need like a mental health day. So I don't know if I can batch paint 100 of those like you do. But that's awesome. That's super
Lots of mental
impressive.
health days.
But I'll kick it back to
Yeah.
Wyndehurst.
Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of people are curious. How's business doing? Is business booming? Is it slowing? Is it peaked? How did COVID affect the commission painter, business world?
Been interesting. For me, it's largely consistent. I'm generally doing stuff for the same client base, and then that will gradually expand as new people come along. And then sometimes people disappear and don't need anything doing for a while because they've worked through their collections. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I'm quite fortunate as being well, very consistent in what I've got on and how much work I've got. With COVID, that was interesting because at the time, a lot of my work was international,
Hmm.
and then I couldn't ship anything. So that caused a bit of a, not necessarily restructuring or refocusing, but between COVID and then various other things that have occurred since then that have just made international shipping difficult, difficult to impossible. That I've kind of had to shift the business to being more UK focused, which ultimately hasn't really affected it particularly, but it caused some stress at the time. But I've been fortunate in being able to adapt to, as the markets have changed and demands have changed. I've been quite lucky at being reactive to that.
Oh, that's it's always, especially like any self-employment is kind of, I'm sure, like discovery, learning,
Mm.
a lot of the time. And
Mm.
so I'm sure that that can be, its own emotional stress and those things as far
Yeah, yeah.
as that goes. But with the tariffs and everything else and the
Mm.
instability of the world, it's wild.
Mm.
What would but that brings us to another good kind of question as we are getting in here to what we talked about with the key points with you is what advice, and maybe a few arrows in your quiver, what
Mm.
advice would you give to people thinking about becoming a kind of a hired brush or a commission painter, like that if you're talking to Andy when he's coming back from university or he's going down there to figure out,
Mm.
hey, what's my job going to be, I guess, artist or
Mm.
this, what advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about taking on that mantle?
So, assuming you're aiming to do this full time as your primary source of income, I would say absolutely get an accountant. Whatever you think you know, you don't, and at some point it's going to come back to bite you in the arse. So yeah, definitely get an accountant just to keep a track of your books and make sure you're paying what you need to pay, so that you don't get stuck at some point later on with some sort of bill. I'd say that's hugely important, is to do that. Get proper financial support and advice as you need it. I mean, I've got one which is not hugely expensive, but she is very, very good and is worth every penny. Um, Other than that, I would say be realistic with your time. Uh, be aware of what you can paint and be aware of the kind of level that you're painting at as well. So it can be worth getting going into competitions can be quite useful, because if you're not placing, then don't take that as a massive sign of discouragement. Take that as a sign of self-awareness, if nothing else. So be aware of that's your level. You're not working at a competition level, which is no bad thing. I mean, the majority of people don't do competition work at every piece they do because you'll burn out and it's not practical. So just be aware that, or mindful of the fact that you're doing stuff that may be at a tabletop level, which is great. Most people are going to be coming along because they want stuff done to that level. They don't want a Euro Militaire winning piece for the 84th Rifleman at the back of your one-to-one recreation of the Battle of Waterloo. They want something that look good on the table, something they can take to their games with their mates that'll look fine without having to be hugely expensive in the process. So it is just a case of managing your own expectations and managing your time. Sit down with a time and just time how long it takes you to paint a figure. Then, if you're aiming to do stuff at different levels, how long it takes you to do a figure from start to finish at the higher levels. Yeah, that's ultimately it. It's just be realistic with time, be disciplined, and get an accountant.
My only follow up to that, and I'm going to kick it to Wyndehurst for kind of the next question on this, on looking for the painter. But my only follow up to that is we've done a whole episode on this, and me and Wyndehurst have talked about our own kind of regiments and the discipline that we have, and like you just seem to like breathe it, which I'm sure is like years of like doing that. Even though sometimes we know I think the right answer, it's hard to take our own advice. And so I did a big push on my Roman infantry here recently, and then next thing I know, like I'm burnt out. I like you had said, hey, I sit down at the desk for 8 hours, but there's some times where just based on the nature of scheduling and conflicts and everything, I'm like, hey, I'm going to push a little bit harder in the next few days, and then now I'm reeling for burnout where I haven't touched a brush in like 3 or 4 days. Do you just know yourself so well after doing this for kind of decades, and again being a commissioned painter for a while, that you don't even touch that? Or do you still have moments where you can surge and then dial it back, surge and dial it back? Like how do you self-regulate? And especially something where you hear that all the time with entrepreneurs, people that are in business for themselves, like hey, they're always on the phone, they're always making the next deal, they're always doing these things. Like what are some good tips that you have on kind of self-regulating? Because even though me and Wyndehurst have said the right things and I think we try to live by them, like I fall victim to it occasionally on burnout.
I mean that's such a huge point, actually. Burnout, it's so easy to get there. That's a big part of why I ring fence part of the hobby just for myself. This is a creative job, so there are going to be days when you're not feeling it, or you've done so much the last couple of days that you physically can't do any painting. So don't. Ultimately, it's like any other job. Sometimes you're going to have sick days. This is the equivalent of a sick day, pretty much. You've just got to kind of listen to yourself a little bit. And again, part of that discipline is taking breaks. You can't work all day, every day, and not burn out. Your body just won't accept that. So you do need to just break things up every little now and then. One thing I find being self-employed is if I'm going to take a holiday or take a few days off for whatever else, holidays, just a general break, is I know that I'll then be making up that time somewhere along the way. And it's a case of don't pressure yourself into thinking that you're doing a bad thing by working this extra time, and don't think you're doing a bad thing by taking time off either, because you need to do it. And that's the hardest thing, because you're effectively not making any money when you're taking time off, but it's better than burning out and just sitting looking at your paintbrush when you're supposed to be working and you just can't bring yourself to actually paint anything. So one of the other things I do to manage it is, I'm quite big on walking and hiking. So before I start work, I'll normally go for a walk in the morning, do a longish walk up through the woods or by the river or whatever. And then when I finish work in the evening, I then go and do another mile and a half or so around the block, just so you've got that equivalent of shutting off mentally. So it's working from home. I'm having the effect of almost leaving the office. So I finish painting of work, go out, walk around the block, and that's my equivalent of like a trip home from work. And then I come home, and then the rest of the evening's kind of free to myself. Then it's creating these mental buffer zones.
A reset, or like almost a mental reset. Yeah,
exactly. Give yourself a bit of resilience. Yeah,
that's awesome. I'll kick it back to Wyndehurst. Excellent. I really appreciate your insight on that, Andy. That's awesome.
It's almost just good advice for anybody working at home or self-employed.
Yeah, it really is.
So, kind of the other side of that question, what advice would you give someone looking to hire a commission painter? And I probably could have used this myself, because I know Kentuckian has availed commission painters several times in the past. And when I was last in the UK for 3 years, I spent a year looking for it, and I found somebody, sent them the army I wanted, A couple months later, they sent it back saying, "I'm sorry, this just was a bigger project than I could take on. I couldn't get to it." And now it's with somebody else, and it's kind of behind schedule due to they had personal life issues. And I'm just like, I didn't know what I was getting into. And so, what advice would you give somebody who's looking for a commission painter?
And there's only one correct answer here, Andy, and that's send it to me. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, I mean, now you've taken my answer. I don't have one. Don't have anything to say now. No, I'd say probably the most important thing to do would be to look over their work. So somebody who's got a works page that's got quite a lot of pedigree to it. So someone who's put a lot of stuff up. It's hard if you're new to the industry. You're looking at somebody who's new to the industry, should I say, as a client, because then they won't have that work history to kind of research into, which is really a problem for anyone coming into it. But yeah, as a client, I would always say just do a bit of due diligence and have a chat with them and see what their lead times are like. Because I mean, if you're aiming to get a large army done, if they come back and say, I can do it in a week, they're probably not going to be able to do it in a week, and they're being a little bit unrealistic with their time and their sort of project management. But if they say, yeah, it'll take me 6 months to get to, or I'll get to it in 6 months, and then it'll take me X amount of time, and they'll give you a more detailed breakdown. So just look into the kind of details that they're telling you. If it's something that seems like they know what they're talking about, and it sounds like a realistic level of expectation of what they're going to be able to put out, rather than telling you what they think you want to hear as a client. If they say what they can actually do, then I'd say that's probably the best thing to look for. And again, I'd probably avoid looking for people who seem a little bit too cheap as well.
So
yeah, it's always probably good
kind of get what you pay for.
to test the waters. Like, do people? You're so well known that I don't think that they probably would do that to you. But I assume, like, sometimes when I've gotten commission painters here in the States, like, I'll be like, hey, I'm going to send you a squad, or I'm going to send you a platoon, something small. Take a try at it. Let me see what you're due. I assume, maybe early when you started, you had people do that were kind of like, who's this Andy Singleton? Let me find out more about him.
Yeah, even now, though, I prefer a client to do that, because they get to know me, they get to know my work, I get to know them. It's just a sensible way to do it. I'd never want it to be any other way, really.
That way, in contracts and from the legal realm, sometimes contracts can't form because there's not mutual assent. The people don't know. So expectation versus reality. And so that's your way to kind of, hey, here's what I can do. If you want me to paint that 500 Roman army, send me a cohort. Here I'll show you, and then you can see if it works for you. That's interesting.
Yeah, and people quite often they'll want a large project doing, but they don't want to pay for a large project in one hit, so they'll send you, I don't know, a squad at a time, for example, and then you'll do a squad at a time for them over the course of a year or so, and that's win-win for everybody, assuming that they're not taking it to an event that weekend or whatever.
Yeah.
If it's like a slow-burning project that they want, because then as a painter you've got a steady job once a month of, it might be a small job, but they do add up. And then they're getting through their project, you're getting this sort of guaranteed bit of income. I'm perfectly happy doing jobs like that.
Is
That's awesome.
Is there a community of commission painters? I mean, do you interact or communicate with other commission painters, or are you pretty insulated?
Not overly, but I think that's just more coincidence rather than anything else, at least on my part. I'm sure there are groups of painters that chat to each other. I mean, a close friend of mine is a professional artist, but she works in a completely different field to this. She works with stained glass, but we're both creatives, so we just sort of socialise from the sort of creative professional standpoint. Ultimately, it's the same kind of work that we're doing, just in different mediums. Yeah, I think there is a community. I just tend not to engage.
Yeah, it's just such a small niche, market. I didn't know if it would
Mm.
be everyone's just too much competition that we can't really interact too much, or there's a fairly large network of talking about the industry and what's going on and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think everybody's just too busy doing their own thing to
Mm.
sort of start setting up networks. Really, occasionally I'll point things off to a friend if it's not something that is in my wheelhouse. If I know somebody else who's done similar work, I'll recommend that somebody go to them. But they've done the same to me as well.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, for the most part though, it's very insular. I think.
Kentucky, you want to take the
Still
next one?
there? Yeah. The big thing now, Andy, you still there? I don't know if you cut off.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'm
The
good.
big thing, the big thing now is kind of what got you into painting, creating, the painting guides. And I know that we've said you've got your ninth kind of in the shoot right now. I assume it's
Yeah.
questions from people like me, just seeing that you're a fantastic painter, and then shooting you a message and being like, "How did you do this? How did you do this?" And I think when I first got back into bolt action, you were somebody I sent some messages and emails to. The late Andy Zeck, he sent me a painting
Yeah.
guide. He did a wonderful job on some stuff. And so these magnificent books with that you've done and that you've kind of displayed with just amazing detail and stuff. Like, what went from uh, commission painter to kind of author slash demystifying the process for the layman? Like, how did that happen?
Uh, it was actually I needed notes on my own color schemes. I'm doing a lot of work of various types. Where I'm jumping between projects fairly rapidly, I'd then want to be able to come back to do, let's say, whatever paints I was using to do three-tone camo on a German vehicle. And I'd want to make a note of what would work, so what I'd used for the actual vehicle colours, and then what paints I'd used through the weathering, because it might be 6 months or a year before I come back to do it any more. So I'd initially just start writing myself notes, and then started doing a blog with a series of reviews on it. And again, I'd put my colour notes in there. And on my own Instagram as well, I'll occasionally put up what's ostensibly a painting guide, but it's more a reference note for me for
You logging it,
what
yeah,
the
you
process I've
logging it.
gone through. Yeah, it's just posting my logs online to an extent. Well, completely. And that sort of escalated a little bit. So I started doing a little bit of writing for Warlord games. I did a few painting guides for them and a few sort of tactical articles as well, and some other bits and pieces. And I was doing quite a series of stuff for them eventually. And then that led on to me doing a few articles for Wargames Illustrated and I think Wargame Soldiers and Strategy as well. I did a couple of pieces for them. And then that in turn led to a friend of mine, John Lambshead, who's an author and games designer. He'd done a few bits with pen and sword, but he'd been asked to do a book about painting, and he thought I'd be more suited for it, so he recommended me to their commissioning editor. So we had a chat, and then they asked me to do a book on, well, a painting guide. I got to choose, so I chose to do Second World War in the Desert. So I did that. They liked it, and then they've just kept on commissioning me ever since.
It's awesome. I love the pictures in there, and just like some of the painting guides, you see like the wonderful product and none of the step by steps.
Mm.
And so even at you, which I think you paint at one of the highest standards out there. I'm trying not to love on you too much here, but the
It's
quick.
like the checks in the post.
Yeah, yeah. So, but the quick guide where you're just like breaking down like the next step
Mm.
to kind of like it helps for somebody like me who I don't think, when I see your minis on a table or I see an army, sell like it just did on one of the Facebook groups, I'm like, wow, that's just really impressive. The LRDG army that you did that I saw was just it was outstanding. It was fantastic. I felt like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
had
that's
this
cool.
insatiable urge to watch Rogue Heroes right there. And so
Yeah.
uh, um regardless of how historically accurate that series is. But when I was when I was looking at it, I was just like, wow, it's something that's unattainable. And for somebody that's painting at your level to kind of like just demystify it from the gray going to this, immaculate, gall and celt on the front to these Romans to the vehicles, that some people really get hammered about the vehicles for some of the stuff you've done. It's awesome. I'm another huge shout out to the viewer and listener. If you enjoy painting, these things and the techniques he says in there, and they are, not to hopefully dissuade you, but they are thick books. Like, you get what you pay for, and they're very well priced. I've paid, Andy, I've paid double for small 5-page PDFs, which I think have not helped me out. And your book is just, it's definitely worth, I think, the pound, the quid, the dollar, whatever, the person needs to do it. I highly recommend people to pick it up. But it's awesome that you got into it. It's a really interesting kind of side way into the hobby. And I like how you did logging. Me and I don't keep it Wyndehurst. I'd be interested if you do. But there have been a bunch of times where maybe I'll keep it with an army or two, and then I'll be immersed in a project, and then I'll forget the colors I've used, and now I'm 2 or 3 projects somewhere else, and I go, what did I use on that? Was it the Citadel red? Was it Vallejo plain red? I don't know.
Yeah, I've tried. I actually got a book, and I was like, this is going to be my painting journal. And I would, to the point where I would take the paint and put it on there and write, okay, this is what I'm painting with it. So I even had like a color match, and I'd done that on one project. And then I've tried, like Andy did, like I just did photos. Like, okay, I think I was doing multicam on some moderns. And like every time I did a color, I would take a photo of the model with that paint next to it. And then I put all those up on Facebook or my blog or Instagram. And it's like, okay, now I can go back and reference that down the road if I need to. But my problem is I haven't been consistent. I keep thinking like I want to with the Syracuse Greek Army. It's like right now on my table, I've got all the paints for the armor grouped together, all the paints for this thing grouped together. And I was like, I should probably write this down so I don't forget, because this is going to be a long stage project.
What is, with as much as you've painted, Andy, do you come up with a guide for each one of, like, if you're painting, Saxons during the Napoleonic period, like a Saxon army or a Duchy of Warsaw, and then you go to Rebs for American Civil War, do you have guides for each one that you've created for your own personal use? And then are these part of a bigger repository where the documents are in the thousands? Like, how does that look for you?
Not overly. With stuff like that, I tend to have more colour recipes. So, say for the Civil War Rebs, I'll have a series of like warm grey recipes and butternut recipes, where I'm just working through a series of browns. And I'm using quite a lot of the Citadel and New Humble ranges of paints these days. And they're, especially the Humble stuff, actually, that's very easy to reference. So going onto the website and just looking at the colours, because they've got all the colour charts and everything on there set out as tables, so they just couldn't be easier to work from. And the Citadel stuff, it's just in a box next to me. So I've gotten a bit lax in keeping the notes now, because it's just become sort of muscle memory of working through, like, where I know those ranges so well, especially with the Citadel stuff, where they're so well defined of going through gradients of colours that I can generally do them by eye now. As long as the clients, if they've come back to me, a year later and said, "Can you do me some more of these?" As long as they can pack one of the figures in, so I can just use that as a bit of a reference.
That's like a
anymore.
It's like a musician playing by ear. It's like you don't need sheet music anymore. Yeah. Like you have it down. No, I'll kick it back to Wyndehurst for the next one.
Yeah, I'll let you take the 11. I want to jump to 12. So this is something we always like to ask individuals tied into the hobby, especially from the business side. But we often hear the phrase, like, the hobby is graying out. It's getting old. Or there's other issues facing the hobby, like 3D printing is going to ruin it for businesses. Do you see any great challenges facing the hobby, like aging out of the majority of the people, or new technologies, or I mean, even with commission painting, I know an individual who got all his armies primarily commissioned painted in Asia, like Southeast Asia, where it's like they just have like workshops where just people batch paint. You just tell them exactly the paints, and it's like, this kind of changing market or outsourcing. Like, is there anything you see really difficulties facing the hobby?
I think the biggest difficulty is just access to local markets now. Say between sort of tariffs and shipping across continents and global problems and everything. That's probably the largest issue I would say currently. With regards to sort of the aging out of the hobby, and that's one of those arguments that's been around pretty much as long as the hobby's existed. I remember I'd got some old military modelling magazines from I think either the 60s or 70s, something like that, long before I was born. And I remember reading in those, people complaining about sort of the hobby aging out, and it's like, well, that was sort of 50 years ago. It hasn't happened yet. It's still the same people. I mean, the model club I go to, I think the youngest member is, I think she's about 10. And then the oldest member's probably in his mid to late 80s.
That's good.
There's, and we're gaining members all the time as well. And we do, I say we, the club does. I mean, I haven't actually been to one, but the club does make and take events up at a museum near here, and that's full of kids during half term, and they're massively enthused by the hobby. And then Airfix, they go to air shows and they do make and take events so people can turn up and make a Spitfire on their stand. And again, that's full of kids and families. I think the hobby's in largely the same place it's been kind of forever, really. You go to an event and you look at the demographics and they haven't changed. It's the same people and the same faces. They might have a different name attached to them, but it's the same lot that's been there as long as I've been going to events. Whether it's people coming into the hobby later in life or whether it's just something about it that attracts people I think once people get over or get into their 30s, once they've got that initial bit of actually usable, disposable income, then that's when they can start indulging in these kind of hobbies a lot more. But yeah, I don't think there's a huge amount of real threats to the industry as such. I mean, 3D printing is just another way of making models. It's no different as from when they went from metal to plastic, really.
No, that's well said, and it's a constant that we hear between a lot of the guests we have, as far as it's the kind of boogeyman under the bed is that it's going to die out, and it never does. And I guess we all are so noticeable of it because it is such a niche hobby. Like you said, it's the same faces, and so we're like, oh, when these faces go away, but it's on us, I think, as gamers too. Are you demoing it? Are you getting it out there to the next few people? Or is Henry Cavill doing that so we can get more people? Or how that looks? Kind of really appreciated the conversation with you on commission painting and what to look for if you're going to get into it or if you're going to search one out. Definitely highlight you, and we'll post some of your work on our Facebook groups as well, just to kind of show everybody who we're talking to. And I know that you've been doing it for a while now, so I think your work kind of speaks for itself. The last question I have is kind of on 11 is before we move on to our other topics, is I've kind of always heard painters, have to give it up when their eyes get bad. There's been a bunch of painters and commission painters that I've known throughout my life, and at one day they're like, I just can't see him anymore. My old man, he painted, and he'd wear the weird glasses at the desk or something, to help with your magnification. You seem like a ways away from that, so I don't think there's any way that you're giving up the paintbrush anytime soon. The source of income. Yeah, I need to get you. We need to get an insurance policy on your eyes or something. No, I think you're ways away from that, so it's not a big deal. But we talked, moving off this conversation and our last kind of like tying this episode up on a bow. Again, total appreciation and thanks for you coming and being here with us, Andy. But we talked kit bag and we talked a little bit to you before we got on air about, it would be interesting if we kick this discussion topic to you. And what is, in the commission painter or Andy's kit bag that helps him in the hobby, and things that we've done in the past. I know Wyndehurst did wet pallets. We've done, really useful boxes for storage. We've done, paint LED lights over our desks. All of those things kind of in there. What kind of is in Andy Singleton's kit bag that may help him either in the hobby and gaming? Like, hey, I use tackle boxes, or this is how I store my army, or this is how this is something that's helped make my hobby life or wargaming life easier. What do you think would be one thing that would be ahead of everything else in your own personal possession?
Definitely a good chair. I mean, I've got a
That's fair.
That's a great answer.
worked. Yeah, no, I've worked for a series of fairly standard office chairs that last a couple of years, then fall apart, and then I was just kind of sick of it. You're sitting at the desk for a long time in really awkward and uncomfortable positions. You're hunched up in the fetal position doing some fake painting, and it's just crap on your body. And that's getting compounded by sitting in a cheap and nasty chair. So a few years ago, I invested in a Secret Labs gamer's chair, which was horrifically expensive, I have to admit, but it's been so good ever since. I mean, just from comfort and health perspective, you don't get any sort of aches from being sat for so long. You don't get any sort of issues of being sort of sat down for as long because your body's properly supported as you're sat there. And, it's important to get up, move around, do some exercise, keep the blood flowing, but the time that you're actually sat at the desk, it's also important to have something that's going to support your back, so get as good a chair as you can possibly afford. And if you've got the option to try it or see the measurements, so make sure you're sitting with something where your legs are at a good ergonomic position rather than sort of tucked up underneath you or dangling because the chair's too big or too small. Get something that'll actually support your frame. And same with the desk, actually. I mean, I'm quite a tall guy, quite a big guy, so I need a desk that's taller than your average desk for this. So I've got somewhere I can actually brace my wrists against. Again, because otherwise you're sat hunched up on the floor, and then you won't be able to paint for long periods of time because you'll just start cramping and seizing up.
I've seen people. I think that's a great recommendation. Good chair, especially for being in it 8 hours a day, grinding away on a Roman or Gallic army. I just envision you now.
Yeah.
But I've seen people using, in my own work, we're at computers a lot, typing away and doing furiously typing away. I know standing desks were really big, like we did standing desk. I've tried to do that a little bit with painting, never really caught on for me. I have a friend who is a masterful author that types away and does, I would say dozens and dozens of pages in a sitting, but does it with a little treadmill under his desk, so he's walking while he's typing. I have no idea how he can do that and walk and type, but it happens. And so I imagine, like, if you do that while you're painting, and then I just think of the horror stories of you, like, getting ready to finish this model and then tripping as you're painting, Caesar or something, and paint going everywhere. But I agree with you on I can feel it on my back, and as I get older, I've only done this in the last 2 or 3 years, but I've shifted to I'll paint at the chair, or then I'll go and I'll take my little green mat and I'll put it in the floor and I'll paint on my stomach as I've got my elbows up, and just to give your back some relief, and then you're bending backwards, so it's another kind of. Wyndehurst, do you paint in the chair, or do you do it from standing or while you're walking?
I am in need of a good option because prior to this house, my office was also my painting area. So whatever computer chair I had and my computer desk is where I did most of my painting. And right now, since I actually have a dedicated hobby area, my chair is a folding metal chair with a half-inch, 4 centimeter thick cushion thing on it that I put another pillow on, and it's dreadful. It's absolutely terrible. It's actually, I think, one of the reasons I haven't been painting as much in the last month or so, because I get down there and it's like 5 models in, it's like, oh man, my butt hurts. Nothing about this situation is good. So
it's a bar stool, yeah.
A bar stool might be better, honestly. So
that's exactly what I was sitting on till I bought this.
Yeah.
We'll kick it to Wyndehurst. We'll go to our final and last section. I'll kick it to Wyndehurst to start it off. on Scouting Report. We'll go to you, Andy, on what's on your painting table. I'd be very interested to know. And then I'll sign us off. I'll do mine, and then I'll sign us off. But again, truly appreciate you being here and just your insights and everything into the hobby. Wonderful human being, Andy Singleton. Look him up again online. He's going to send me a pound check after this for all the ads we're giving him. No, but he's always been gracious. I talked to him. You've probably heard his voice out there before. He's done a lot of other podcasts. He's participated, been guests and everything. So really just truly appreciate you being here, Andy. Can't thank you enough. And the listener and viewer, like, go look at his books for sure. They're money well spent. But I'll kick it over to Wyndehurst for our next section. He'll talk us through that.
Yep. So Scouting Report. So essentially we're just looking at what's coming up for us in the hobby, what's on our paint table, what projects, games are on the horizon for us. So for me, I am starting to plug away at that Greek Syracuse army I'm working on. I got the first unit of hoplites, technically the second because I did a unit like a year ago, but the first since I got here, finished up unit of hoplites and some artillery from the Echoes of War Kickstarter. Kentuckian mentioned earlier, 3D printed stuff. So I'm kind of working some 3D printed stuff into it that I've been able to print myself. And this week, I prepped, and try to get some photos up. I prepped the dirt that I got from Syracuse itself. I didn't get any photos of prepping that dirt itself, but on that same trip we were in Rome, so I need to prep that dirt. So I've got a tub of dirt from Rome and a tub of dirt from the city of Syracuse, so that when I do my Greeks, the army is going to be half allies, mercenaries, half actual Syracusans. So only the Syracusans will get the dirt from Syracuse. Otherwise, I wouldn't have enough. But when I do my Republican Romans to follow up with that army, they'll get the dirt from Rome. So, but that process, baking it, laying it out, sifting it, and everything.
This will be evidence used in the court-martial
for smuggling.
for smuggling ancient artifacts. I look forward to seeing this in an Italian courtroom one day where he is jailed for molesting an archaeological site.
Well, they didn't get me. So I also have dirt from my deployment in Africa because I was working on moderns there. And I was like, well, I need basing material. Let me just go get some locally. So I have this whole force of U.S. modern military infantry, all based with dirt from Africa. So it's coming like a little collection point. Like, where can I get dirt from the site? But
that must have been what Sergeant in Saving Private Ryan, where he's putting that in his bag. He's going to base that army when he gets home. That's probably what it was for.
Yeah. So working on those, and then just kind of getting the hobby room finished setting up. It's pretty much set up, but my table's too small. So I've got a 3x6 surface area, and that's 3 feet deep is not really deep enough for anything other than a skirmish game. So trying to figure out how I'm going to get a larger surface on top of that, and how big do I want to go. So I think I might go 8x6, or is that too big? Maybe 6x5 or something. But yeah, that's in my immediate future. And then I'm going to try and set up an escalation bolt action league here. There's been some talk in the local community for bolt action, World War II stuff. And I'm going to try and encourage that and maybe put a league together. So that's what I got. So Andy, what have you got on your scouting report? Andy?
Ooh. What have I got? There's 40k army to finish by Friday. Well, Thursday, technically. Yeah.
And it's still on sprue. It's still on sprue.
One of them is. Yeah, one more. It's still on sprue.
Lee.
Yeah. Other than that, it's going to be some more scale modelling projects I want to get finished. I really enjoying building Shermans at the moment, so I've got a couple more of those I fancy doing, and then some more Battle Britain themed aircraft too. That'll probably wind their way down to the museum at some point. I assume they will anyway. As soon as I mention that I've done them, they're probably going to be we've got a bit more room in the cabinet. So yeah, all right then, go on then. Personal projects though, need to chat with my mate that I'll be doing battle group with, see what he fancies doing. And then see if I can talk him into doing some Napoleonic skirmish as well. I fancy just getting into that. I've got a load of the brigade games. sort of sharp themed characters, and I actually can't remember what I've got. A friend and I put in an order last year to make sort of the postage not quite so horrific. So I got a sack full of various British bits from the Brigade Paul Hicks sculpts, and he got some other bits and pieces. So yeah, it's just a case of going through that, seeing what there is, seeing what I fancy painting. But yeah, it'll probably be a couple of historical projects of some sort. Definitely Napoleonic British from the Peninsula, and probably something 20mm World War II, probably German or American, I think. Maybe British. I'll have to see what's in the stash, to be honest. But yeah, that's one of several things that are probably going to be happening, and I'll probably do something completely different than none of those in the end.
Nice.
Hey, you're being honest about being the butterfly, like we all are.
Yeah.
So you're being very truthful. Is all I
Germans.
see in that.
Maybe
Yeah.
Americans. Maybe British. Canadians. Russian.
Yeah.
French and Indian War.
Well, now you mention it.
That's truly. I mean, we're all cut from the same cloth in that sense. I'm still kind of. I've got 99% of my World War II painted, so I've kind of moved into Ancients in the last like 2 or 3 years here, and so painting the Caesarian Legion is kind of what's on my mind. I flew too close to the sun, like we talked about, and I got burnout, so I started assembling a Pompey's army, and I'm 100 minis deep in assembling that, and I haven't touched a brush in a few days. And then what do we do, Andy? You're totally right. I assembled all of the phalangites for Pyrrhus and his army. None of them are going to see a paintbrush in a long time, but I'm just very distracted. But I'm looking forward to getting Pyrrhus on the tabletop. So I think those are the big things as far as like what's coming up. Ancients is going to be trying to grind through that. The other big things are, like Wyndehurst said, unfortunately or fortunately with the military, we get a kind of butterfly around the USA and abroad, and that allows us to interact with a lot of people. Trying to kind of integrate with some few local stores. Limited success just based on my kind of schedule right now in life, but hopefully getting to roll some more dice. There's a great group in Richmond, Virginia that they did a Circus Maximus game, Andy. It looked awesome. Like they had 14, 15 players. They're doing a Circus Maximus league. And then on Halloween, I think they're going to do the final game, and they want everybody to dress up in togas and stuff. So that'll be interesting and fun. I might try to pop down there for that. But yeah, a lot of Ancients on my horizon. Hopefully I can stay disciplined enough. But Andy talking about Shakos and bayonets, I'm sure I will be distracted this evening as I'm falling asleep and looking at Russians and Ney fighting in the trench coat, and holding off for the bravest of the brave. So no, it's as you said. Hopefully, we can maintain some discipline and keep things fresh. And you really have a good outlook on that, Andy. And you're seeing it here from somebody who does it at a level, like I can't even fathom. I guess that would be, like the hundreds of thousands of miniatures you've probably painted, Andy. That's and I'm even counting the 6mm in there if you've ever done that.
Yeah.
So it's good to see that the struggles are always there and the way to kind of fight through them. So we last plug for his books, as well as check Andy out. Give him a shot at painting an army if you do have one and you're looking for it, or if you're thinking about being a commissioned painter. And Andy gave some pretty good steps on here about how to kind of think and work through that. And Sherpa, we're always about being positive and helping kind of contribute to this hobby and expanding it. Any last comments from anyone before we sign us off?
Yeah, if anybody's got any comments or questions, feel free to shoot me a message on either Facebook or Instagram, wherever really. You can find me at Volleyfire Painting on Facebook and Volleyfire Andy on Instagram. So, if anyone needs any advice on painting or becoming a painter, then yeah, just drop me a line and I'll see if I can help if I can.
Awesome. That's awesome. Truly appreciate it, Andy. Well, without further ado, thanks again. We're going to, last kind of admin notes are we're going to look to have another episode kind of being recorded in October. Don't know if we'll be able to get 2 out in November or, if it will stagger on into the winter months here. But really appreciate everybody. Again, continue to comment, engage with us. Tell us your thoughts on this episode. Other commission painters out there from the States, other countries, please comment on this episode. Let us know kind of, things that you've learned or at least experienced and kind of in helping you guide in your own path. And then people that have used commission painters, when I ask my friends about this, the horror stories I've heard out there in the past, whether getting an army, never getting it back or things like that, I'm sure those exist. So it won't with volley fire painting, but there are some other ne'er-do-wellers out there. But truly appreciate it. Thanks again, guys. Can't wait for the next episode. And again, we'll keep that a little bit of a surprise. I really look forward to that one. But without further ado, please grab your shield, your spear, your musket, your rifle, your belt-fed machine gun, and join us on the next episode of On Patrol. Over and out.
All right, I'm just getting recording going. Like I said, again, it's just trying to make sure I get the right screen recording. Otherwise, they'll just be pictures of us.
Hey, that's fine. That's good. We'll put Andy's pretty paintings up for the whole episode.
Yeah.